Hello and welcome to another Whiteboard Sessions with me, Andrew Maff. I am the founder and CEO of BlueTuskr, a full-service digital marketing company for e-commerce sellers. And today what I'm going to go over with you is the 8 different B2B marketing strategies that work just as well for a D2C e-commerce seller. So I'm going to dive right in and I'm going to go through my top 8 that are not really in any particular order. It's just the 8 that I know have become tried and true and worked well for us. So the first one I'm going to go over is live in-person events. Now, obviously, with everything that's been going on, these are not as easy to do as they once were. However, these are obviously starting to come back now. And the great thing about live in-person events is the ability to really showcase different things for your customers. So let me give you a couple ideas here. So let's say that you're a seller and you have some kind of really tight-knit community behind you. So let's say you do coolers, right? So you got into that cooler market like everyone else did with Yeti and you're fighting up against them, but you really wanted to do like this whole tailgating thing. So really what you started to do is started to cater towards tailgating events. So yes, you can set up shop and just sell, your coolers in a tent at some kind of tailgating event, whether you're at an NFL game or an NHL game or NBA or any of those. Or the other option that you have is to also set up a custom event where essentially you do your own custom tailgating event. Yes, you may still have your coolers for sale, but really this is about bringing your diehard customers into one place. So another great example would be something along the lines of, let's say, you sell surfboards. I know for some reason on all of these episodes of Whiteboard Sessions, I always talk about surfing. I have no idea why. I don't surf, but somehow we got here. So let's say you do surfing, right? And that's the product line that you sell. Well, the other option that you have is to do your own in-person event of whether you're doing a competition or you're doing just a get-together where every year you guys travel to a certain area. But just because you're an e-commerce seller and you obviously sell your products nationwide doesn't mean that you can't have some kind of localized in-person event that can really help build kind of a closer relationship with you and your customers and also start to build word of mouth in that central localized area. The second one we're going to talk about is podcasts. Now, podcasts are very much, I would say, underrated. And a lot of times what I'll find as an e-commerce seller, I'll sit down with them and try to figure out ideas of stuff to do that maybe other people aren't doing. And podcasts always seems to come up and there's always a bit of a pushback. And the reason there's tends to be a bit of a pushback is because the question is always like, who would want to hear from me? And, why would they want to listen to me regarding whatever it is? And the thing is, you have to not think about the specific product. You have to think about the community that's buying your product and how you can relate to them. So, for example, let's say there's a company around here that does home brewing kits and they sell them all over the place online. And what they've started to do is actually work with, they've done some of the live person events where they've gone to breweries and worked with things like that, but they actually started their own brewery, in-house brewery podcast, where essentially what they do is they just talk about different breweries and different beers and where people are getting hops from, where people are getting their wheat from, like all the different things that can kind of be incorporated into the beer making process at a home kit. So what they're doing is this is a constant weekly podcast where they have this conversation where really all they're doing is just entertaining people that are in the beer industry or that just like beer, in which case that could be your average direct-to-consumer person that's looking to buy a home kit. So it doesn't always have to be specific about the home kit. You don't have to sit there and just talk about your actual product. You just have to sit there and entertain while you're the one that's sponsoring it and obviously somehow your brand name is incorporated into the podcast name. The third one is gated content. So this one is interesting to me. Typical. My pen's dying. So this one's typical. This one's interesting to me because I find a lot of sellers that don't really like doing gated content stuff. A lot of the ads that they run, it's just straight to the product, buy the product, or leave. And I really hate that because you think about it with like a car salesman approach of if you walk into a car dealership, all they do is just nag you and they're like, what car can I get you in? Let's get you this one. Let's start signing a deal now. Like it's literally just buy. And there's no relationship to it and it feels grimy. So what we always suggest is for e-commerce sellers to consider some kind of interim step between the person visiting the site and then the person just purchasing. So what else could you be offering them? Yes, there's things out there like ebooks and white papers, but you also have other things like quizzes and calendars and checklists and all these different things that you could create. So all you have to do is think about, again, it's about your community. So So you have your product, and your product's going to be obviously relevant to the specific product, but the community that's buying that, what else are they interested in? Is there some kind of blog post or article or kind of anything that you can write where if that's bringing in that clientele or that customer base, that you can then offer them some kind of gated content, in which case you're just asking for an email. You're not asking them to purchase anything. You're not asking them to do anything else. Yes, technically, if you look at like a first time buyer pop-up of like 10% off or something like that, that's technically still gated content. But anything else that you can actually gate where all they have to do is provide an email to get that from you, in which case now you have better opportunities. You have a ton of different email drip campaigns. You can just plug those email addresses into almost any advertising platform and run ads straight to them. There's a ton of other things that you can do with emails. So if your sole focus is just purchases, you're missing out on the opportunity of gathering emails and developing a big email list, because that is a really, really strong asset to use. So the next one we're going to do is, this one's always funny. So this is labeling your CEO as like, I don't even know why I do a whiteboard session. There's no way you can read that. The other thing you can do is like a CEO and influencer kind of thing, right? So this is kind of like, you see a lot of this in the B2B side, where you get this guy who's like the big to do in the whole industry. All they do is talk about, what's going on in their industry and stuff like that. Let's be honest, I'm kind of doing that right now. So literally this. But really all it is taking a person and making them the face of the company. Sometimes that's the founder. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's someone else in the company. But the whole reason that people take that approach is because people don't really like to buy from a company if they're not really comfortable with the company already. So what might happen is actually that you're going to look at like people are more comfortable with buying from a person. So if they actually get to know the founder, you'll see a lot of times that the founders will have more of a following on Instagram or on any of these social platforms than the company will. Or if the founder has his own newsletter, her own newsletter, or blog post or anything like that, there's more people going to that specific person than they may be going to the company in a lot of situations. And the reason that can help is because a lot of people prefer to buy from the founder, prefer to buy from a person than they do from a business. So if you can actually leverage that, and you can do all of these things, whether your founder is the host of the podcast, whether your founder signed off on some gated content that he wrote, or whether your founder is going to be the one like doing a talk at the live event, whatever you have, it's getting that person's name out there. And it's a lot easier to get a person's name out there than it is to get an entire business, just from a funding standpoint, because it's expensive to get brand awareness sometimes. So by using that opportunity, you can actually use their name to kind of narrate the story of your product line, which can actually, because I don't see this happen a lot, and it's always very odd to me that this doesn't happen. So there are always going to be a ton of indirect competitors, or even just other companies that are similar to you in the fact that they sell to the same community, but maybe they don't, maybe they're just not direct competitors. So what we'll see a lot of times is there's certain companies out there that will do this, but essentially what you'll see is when you buy a product from a company, maybe they have an insert in there that's a discount to another company. Or maybe when you sign up for someone's newsletter, you'll see that they're giving you like 10% off to another company. And the reason that people start to do this is there's a ton of ways where you can pull in more revenue, and then obviously where you can start to pull in more customers. So if you have a product line where you can work with someone else. So again, let's go down this surfer route for whatever reason. So let's say you sell surfboards, and you have this big newsletter that you send out that's all around surfboards and everything that you have and great things with surfing. Then there's another one that's Surf Wax, and they don't sell surfboards, but they have a very similar newsletter, and all they do is talk about surfing, and their whole community is all surfers. The two of these companies can actually work together to promote each other's product, because they have an audience that this company wants, and this company has an audience that this company wants. So by doing some kind of tag and play here where you can actually start to promote each other's company, you start to basically rent other people's lists or rent other people's like space on their website. I've seen some companies where they've worked out deals where they each have some kind of blog post that they both promoted. So it's kind of helping it look like, hey, we're just working with this company because they really know what they're talking about, when in reality you're offering a sale. And then again, there's other ways where you can do it, where if someone's list is bigger than the other and it's not exactly tied the way you want it to, and it's not a perfect world, you can also work out different affiliate programs where if you have a newsletter where you're willing to provide more value to your email list by giving them a discount to another company that you know they would be interested in, then there's absolutely benefit to that. And then you'll obviously help with your list because they're never going to know what they're getting. Sometimes they might get a discount to your site. Sometimes it might just be informational. And then other times it might be a discount to someone else's site. So now your newsletter is becoming that much more valuable. Webinars. Webinars is interesting. This one's not 100% perfect. There's sometimes situations where webinars doesn't really work as well. But the one thing that webinars can be used for on a product basis that sometimes doesn't always compute with a lot of e-commerce sellers is your webinar doesn't have to constantly be a teaching. Like if you're attending a webinar in B2B, they're kind of boring. There's slides. You sit there, they ask questions, and at the end, they offer you some kind of crap that they say that you can't get anywhere else when in reality you can. But what you can actually do with webinars on an e-commerce side is think about the different ways that you can leverage just doing a live video like that. So we've seen where we've worked with e-commerce sellers where we do a webinar with the founder, who's essentially the influencer of the company, and then we get an influencer in that space. So again, I don't know why I keep doing this, but let's do surfing. So if we have surfing where a founder's a big surfer, he sells surfboards, he loves doing it, and he brings on an athlete that's, one of the top surfers in the world. And then they just have a webinar that's just talking about surfing and talking about, different techniques and things like that. The best places this person's been to, to basically go surfing. There's a ton of different questions that they could be asking. But basically what it really does is it allows you to kind of have this like exclusive live event where it's a webinar and there's a bit of a teaching behind it. And then, at the end, if you want to throw out doing some kind of like giveaway or anything like that, by all means, but it's also a great way to grow your list. Another one is informational based newsletters. So this one is a little more common, but thought this would be a good idea, but my handwriting is garbage. So informational newsletters, you got to think of like most e-commerce sellers, they think when they send out an email, it's got to have a promotion in it. And if it doesn't, why am I even reaching out to them? And the issue that I always find is that when they first even kind of test doing an informational newsletter, they do like one or two, and then they're like, oh, no one cares. But the problem is that your customer base wasn't expecting that. So they may see it and they go, I don't know what this is. And so your open rate is probably going to get pretty low until you can start to get people used to the fact that you're sending out informational newsletters. So it doesn't always have to be a 10% off. It doesn't always have to be some kind of like, hey, here's our new product or anything like that. It can simply be some kind of informational news that you've done that's relevant to your industry. So whether you have blog posts or whether you're pulling blog posts from other people, it doesn't matter if you drive traffic somewhere else. As long as you're supplying some kind of value to your customer base, they're going to really enjoy your newsletter. Just obviously, I wouldn't drive them to a competitor's page. So if you do some kind of informational newsletter that has like your blog posts in it, it has other people's articles and news in it that's just relevant to your community, it becomes this informational newsletter that people keep an eye out for, whether you do it weekly or monthly. And it's really kind of like this overarching news of everything going on that's relevant to your community. So if you sell pet products, it could be anything around like studies that have come out about how to take care of your dog or your cat. Or again, if you're surfing, it could be about all of the different events that might be going on across the world that are different things for surfing, or how you can tune into certain areas. There's so many different things that you could write email newsletters about to keep that email list warm. Because as soon as you go too long without sending out any kind of email to your list, that list can go cold. You're going to get spammed. You're going to get unsubscribed from the next time that you try to reach out to that list. And your email list is key. Last but not least is LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn. This is fun. Last thing with LinkedIn. So here's the thing. All this stuff gets tied into LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is a great place to advertise your e-commerce company with a couple exclusions. If your founder is doing the whole influencer route, great. Keep at it. Keep doing it. Because what might happen, what you're always trying to think about is like you're trying to think of like sales and revenue and how am I going to get more product out. But what you could also be thinking about is what could our founder be doing that might get us a discount on some of the stuff that we're offering? So, hey, our founder's really great. Maybe I'm going to do a live video for like a 3PL that you're using, in which case they give you like some kind of discount for a while. Or there's a company that you want to try their new app. So instead of paying for it, you just do some kind of live video. But then there's also the product line you have to think about. Is LinkedIn where your community is? So there's people out there that do office supplies or suits, any kind of apparel that's more professionalized, or anyone that does like customized embroidering on different apparel for companies. It is obviously a much more B2B play, but there is so much that you can do on LinkedIn that can still help you sell product. Or worst case scenario, the other thing you have to think about too is if down the road you're worried about hiring and you need to be able to make sure that like people really want to work with you, promoting your company and how awesome it is to work there on LinkedIn is fantastic, because when it comes time for you to hire people again, it's going to be that much easier. So these are the 8 things that I always say when we go through a list of like, hey, what else could we be doing that maybe we're not trying? These are 8 B2B marketing strategies that I always see D2C e-commerce sellers are not trying out. I always suggest testing as much as possible, and I highly suggest testing these 8 things out. But that's all I have for you today. If there's anything I missed that you think is a B2B strategy that typically isn't D2C, comment below. I'm happy to update the video. But do the usual: rate, review, subscribe, and we'll have these videos every week. So if there's anything else that you'd like me to cover, feel free to comment and I'll make sure to cover it next time. But appreciate it, and I will see you all next time.